WNST, Taos, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are taking a little respite on the Maryland Crab Cake Tour here this week. It is a bye week around here, trying to give Luke some time off too, give the crabs a little bit of rest. We'll be back on the Crab Cake Tour beginning the 18th. We'll be at Pappas next Friday up in Cockeysville. We're looking forward to that. All of it brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with Goodwill and Win Donation. And it will be 2 easy weeks and good mojo here in Baltimore, as even the Phillies didn't get to win the World Series. We feel okay about that around here. The 6-3 Ravens take to the bye weekend, and Luke Jones is here to talk all things after picking up the pieces of beating the Saints in a game where skill position players were at a premium, Luke, and I think that's going to be the issue here for a little while. We talk so much about the defense and Roquan Smith and the stoutness of the defense. Meanwhile, the offense, I don't know what you expect when Andrews isn't out there. I don't know what you expect when Rashad Bateman isn't out there. I don't know what you expect when Kenyon Drake is your lead back, but it worked, and they won kind of going away, and they're in a really, really nice position right now. I don't know about offensively, but if they get some of these bodies back, it's going to be nice.
Yeah, and I think the offense played well enough. They were good enough on Monday night, and certainly you love the touchdown drive that was capped by the Isaiah Likely touchdown reception, which was just a beautiful play call by Greg Roman and Lamar Jackson and Likely and the offensive line, and everyone executed there. They moved the ball specifically on the ground. They moved the ball pretty consistently, especially in the second half. As they really got into their ground game and didn't throw the ball a whole lot. I think Lamar Jackson only completed 2 passes in the second half, and they didn't really try to throw the ball a whole lot. So, certainly
ever since I wrote the column this, that they need to run the ball, they've been running the ball, right? I mean, they are such a good running team when they want to be, that to come out and try or think they're going to throw the ball 35 or 40 times, especially without receivers, right? That's a different. But they're being forced to do what they do best, and they're doing it well.
Yeah, and look, I'm not gonna just acquiesce there. They need to throw the ball better than they have been. But as it pertains to what they did Monday night, and as you just said, no Mark Andrews, and you're still figuring out Rashad Bateman, and Deshaun Jackson played sparingly, and left the game with a hamstring issue. Whether it's minor or not, that's the reality of leaning on a speedy 35-year-old who's well past his prime and had injury issues years ago. Demarcus Robinson was banged up, although certainly, he had an opportunity, should have called a touchdown, and Lamar Jackson missed him. So, they're figuring that out, and that's okay, by the way. Let's be very clear about that. It's not as though the offense needs to be this perfect finished product, especially when you talk about all of the injuries that they've had at the skill position spots, wide receiver, tight end, and running back, for that matter. But I think what's encouraging is Monday night was a great reminder of, we always talk about Lamar Jackson in terms of passing and his ceiling there, and what he did in 2019, leading the league in touchdown passes. But Monday was a great reminder of just how high the floor is, even on a night where he missed some throws. And you could even hear him, not just in his post-game press conference with the media in New Orleans, but talking to ESPN just as the game ended. He was ticked that he missed those throws, missed that touchdown to Demarcus Robinson. So there's never that sense of him being satisfied with how he plays. So yeah, he missed some throws, and yeah, you look at the collection of pass catchers right now, and it makes you uneasy. But at the same time, they still scored 27 points. Granted, 7 were set up. That was set up nicely by the defense on a takeaway, but they still moved the ball. They still controlled the clock. Time of possession was a major advantage for them, and I think it really allowed the defense to continue to pin its ears back, getting after Andy Dalton. But they got the job done, and that's something that you should feel really good about. And Lamar Jackson, we say it all the time, and you and I argue about it all the time. Monday was a great example of why would you ever want to take away him running the football, because it's truly what makes him special. Even on a night where he was not as sharp as he'd like to be throwing the football, and not as sharp as we've seen him be plenty of times, regardless of where people want to rank him as a passer as it pertains to other quarterbacks. But Monday was a great example of just how darn high the floor is for Lamar Jackson on a given night, where you can look at the final stats and say, well, he only He only threw for 133 yards and he only completed 12 of 22 passes. But anyone who watched the game,
Yeah, well,
Lamar
why are you going
Jackson.
to give him all that money? He only threw 12. He only completed 12 passes. What kind of quarterback is he? And it's a different standard you judge him from. It really is.
It is because he's a different player. I mean, he truly. I know it's cliche, and there are times where certainly there are things to criticize or things that he does need to get better. And yeah, he does. He needs to be more accurate with the football. I mean, he missed a handful of throws. And when you're talking about only throwing 22 times and you miss a handful, that's a high percentage, right? But he ran for 82 yards, and his legs continue to be the difference. And Kenyon Drake said it after the game. I mean, Kenyon Drake doesn't rush for 93 yards if Lamar Jackson's not his quarterback. And that's what we continue to say about this running game. Just the mere presence of Lamar, whether he is running or not, makes their running game so much better. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this because we talk so much about Lamar Jackson. We talk so much about wide receiver, or no Mark Andrews, no Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins is on IR. But you Rashad Bateman, you go through the names that weren't out there or the names that are out there, and you're wondering if it's good enough at the skill positions. But then you look at the offensive line, and this is a group that continues to play better and better and better. And Ronnie Stanley is looking every week much like Ronnie Stanley pre-ankle injury. And I think that's remarkable. And we probably haven't given enough oxygen to that, and how much credit
I would say the first couple
there.
weeks of the year, he was still looking like he's not out there. He's not doing it. Even if he does it, how well will he do it? He's going to try to play. And we're like, fine. And again, to me, it's much like Deshaun Jackson and saying, well, he's out there until his hamstring goes. I don't know that's the case with Ronnie Stanley. It certainly doesn't feel that way. It feels like he gave himself enough time. And I know it was sort of trite when Harbaugh was saying he'll be ready when he's ready.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, he's making a lot of money. Is he going to be ready or not? He looks like part of the team. Looks like he never left to some degree, right? Well, relationship-wise, on the sideline, leadership-wise, he's back for now, right?
No question about it. And I mean, you mentioned the leadership piece. We have to mention this. I mean, that fourth quarter drive where delay a game, slow snapping the ball, you have to use a timeout. If you notice, I mean, Lamar Jackson got heated there. And by the way, I don't mind that. Hey, how many times have we seen Tom Brady go nuts? And I'm not saying you should be breaking tablets on the sideline, but the point is you see fire from franchise quarterbacks. And in that case, it was Ronnie Stanley, and they were fine after the fact. I mean, you saw them, they were standing next to each other on the sideline and there was no issue. So I don't think it was drama as much as just heat of the moment, but that's a great example of what you just mentioned. Ronnie Stanley was right there being the one to, whatever the interaction there, whether it was just calm down or whether it was, hey, you're yelling at the wrong guy or whatever, he was right in the middle of that. And that again speaks to what you just said, that Ronnie Stanley's back. And
well, Ronnie Stanley's a really calm cat, right? Like in general, for Ronnie Stanley to be raising his voice is a little, he's been here a while. He's here before Lamar.
Well, and Lamar, for the most part, is a very, laid back kind of guy. But in the heat of the moment at that time where, you're forced to burn a timeout and you're not snapping the ball quickly enough and you have to take a delay a game. And let's face it, that kind of torpedoed a drive that could have been a touchdown that really put the game away. And instead they settle for a field goal, which, in the big picture, not the end of the world, but certainly things you want to clean up. And we've talked about it with tempo for this team and things of that nature. But in that moment, it was Ronnie Stanley talking to Lamar Jackson. And it's, as you said, even going back to week 3 or week 4, it's not something you were taking for granted, even at that point, knowing one, we knew he's going to get back on the field at that point, but what's going to look like? Is he going to stay on the field? Is he anything close to the guy that the Ravens gave a $100 million contract to 2 years ago? And the answer to all those questions to this point has been a resounding yes. I mean, he looks, I don't want to say he's 100% all the way back, but he's really close. I mean, he's playing at a high level, and Pro Football Focus is grading and all the different metrics that you would look to evaluate say he's really playing at a high level. So you have him. I think Morgan Moses has played some of his best football the last couple of weeks. A guy we haven't mentioned much other than just in not so flattering terms. I think Ben Powers has quietly had a really nice season at left guard, which we talked so much about that competition or lack thereof over the summer. And you have Linderbaum, who, he has his ups and downs here and there, but for the most part, I think you have to be really pleased with how he's looked as a rookie, a first round center, and you still have Kevin Zeitler at right guard. So as much as we're talking about skill players in the passing game and Lamar being missing some throws here or there, not having Mark Andrews, what are you going to do without Rashad Bateman on the outside? This offensive line's playing at a really high level, and when they are playing at a high level and you're running the ball the way that the Ravens were able to get into their running game in the second half, especially, it does become much more difficult to beat this football team. So, again, just like we talked about with the defense, want to keep guys healthy, you got to keep it going. And in the case of the offense, need to get some of these guys back, which I think they will over the bye week. They'll get Edwards back. They'll get Mark Andrews back. We'll see what J.K. Dobbins looks like in a few weeks when he gets back on the practice field. Again, expectations can't be high there, but doesn't mean you write them off entirely either. But in the meantime,
we wrote Ronnie Stanley off.
Exactly. So in the meantime, though, Kenyon Drake has done a really nice job, and it wasn't a major development, but I love seeing Lamar Jackson throw to him a couple times out of the backfield. That looks smooth, and that's another element for this offense that we haven't necessarily seen a whole lot of the last couple of years. So there's a lot to like, and it wasn't a complete performance by the offense, and you kind of look at it, and again, 133 passing yards. And, I did have to laugh where Lamar Jackson, I guess it was credited that he was sacked 3 times. And he actually took some issue with that in the post game. He said, look, you shouldn't be crediting the O-line with giving up a sack when I scramble and get back to the line of scrimmage, which he has a point there. So not really the traditional sacks in the way that you would think about them, but there was still plenty to like. And, even though the numbers were modest, you saw James Prochet make a couple catches. You saw Josh Oliver with a 19-yard completion, to move the chains. I mentioned Drake. DeMarcus Robinson was in position to catch a touchdown. So it's not what the Bills have. It's not what the Chiefs have right now from a passing game standpoint. It's certainly not what Miami has, which, the Dolphins have just been, you question if they can stop people, but certainly people haven't been able to stop them when Tua's been upright and healthy and throwing to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. But the Ravens they play a different brand of football, and there's a lot to like about this football team still. There's still things they need to clean up. There's no question about that, which the bye week will be a big part of that. But we mentioned it in a previous segment. You just look at the coming out of the bye, that schedule sets up for them to really get on a roll. And hey, they got to go out and take care of business. But it really does set up for them to get healthy and continue to get better just a little bit every week, and put themselves in position to win this division, get into the playoffs. But not just that, but also see where the chips fall in terms of playoff positioning and seeding and all that. So you have to like where this team is, even acknowledging, there are still things that they can clean up and get better. There's no question about that. And Lamar Jackson said as much in the post-game press conference.
The Mark Andrews injury, let's talk a little bit about that, because getting him back, that's crucial for in every way. I had JT the Brick had me on his show, on a Sirius show after the game, and was asking about sort of the lineage of tight ends, and said, well, why does Harbaugh love tight ends? And I'm like, well, this organization, going back to Shannon Sharp, I was watching the Baltimore Bullies of ESPN that's going to be out in February. You think about these tight ends. Andrews being the key guy in all of this. They missed him on Monday night. I don't think there's any doubt about that. When you're talking about Lamar having a lighter night, he didn't have his binky.
Yeah, and look, let's be very clear about this. It's the same when Patrick Mahomes doesn't have Travis Kelce. It's the same when think back to we talked about this last week. Tom Brady missing Rob Gronkowski, or at least what Rob Gronkowski used to be for him, not just in Tampa Bay, but going, of course, all the years back in New England. And in the case of, you mentioned the organization and their affinity for tight ends. And look, when you have a Hall of Fame tight end who ran the football side for as many years as Ozzie Newsome did, I think you're probably going to have a little bit of a bias there. But that's not even a bad thing, to be clear. But let's face it, Lamar Jackson loves throwing the tight ends as well. You look at Monday night's game, Isaiah Likely, even though he only had the touchdown catch, he had a team high 5 targets. So you miss of course you're going to miss someone who's one of the 2 best at his position in the NFL, and that's where Mark Andrews is at this point. I think back to a couple years ago when the perception was it was Travis Kelce and George Kittle kind of in that top tier. Well, I think Andrews has replaced Kittle at this point, and did last year, quite frankly, by that point in time, with Kittle having some of the injuries and Andrews just being as damn good as he is. So, yeah, you're going to miss a guy like that, especially in a passing game that is not high volume, like the Ravens, tend to be. I guess first half of the Tampa Bay game notwithstanding. So, you need to get him back. It's the shoulder injury. Uh, John Harbaugh said it at the start of last week that it wasn't, quote, a major injury, which tells you that it's not a completely minor injury either, which is why he missed Monday night's game, didn't travel with the team to New Orleans, in fact. But,
Well, shoulder when you're blocking, man, not
oh,
good.
sure. No question. And to be clear, that doesn't mean that he won't be fine, but I think it was very wise and to me a no-brainer. I don't even know if you credit the Ravens for being smart as much as they're not dumb in saying that, we have the bye week coming up. This was an NFC game anyway. Even if the Ravens had lost, it doesn't have colossal playoff implications from a tiebreaker standpoint. So yeah, you were always going to rest up Mark Andrews and try to get him right. Because remember, he was also dealing with the knee, which was hindering him quite a bit as well. He had only practiced once in those 2 weeks leading up to the Tampa Bay game. So he needs to get right. The bye week's going to be crucial there. But I haven't gotten any indication that it's something that's a major injury. As John Harbaugh, used the same language that John did, but get him right, and hopefully have him back soon after the bye week, and hopefully that knee is not as cranky as it had been, and you get him for the second half of the season. You'll sacrifice Mark Andrews, his presence for one night if it means you can get him back out there and healthy for the entire second half of the season. So, Gus Edwards, minor hamstring issue, so he'll be fine. Coming out of the bye week, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be ready to go against Carolina. Maybe Andrews is a little more of a question, without knowing how the next couple weeks go. But J.K. Dobbins, one more game on IR for him. We'll see how long it takes him to ramp up. Again, I don't know what the expectations will be for him at this point. I think you got to be realistic, but wide receiver, we'll see. I mean, we saw a very brief glimpse of Deshaun Jackson before his hamstring tightened up, which it's kind of that's Deshaun Jackson. That's been Deshaun Jackson for the last 6-7 years. I mean, availability has been a major issue for him.
I always disliked him as a player. I said when he walked on the field, I said to my wife, I'm like, I always hated that guy. I always like rooting against that guy, whether he was a Redskin, an Eagle, whatever he was, 35 years old. Dennis and I got into it the day they signed him 2 weeks ago. And I said, Dennis, how many balls is he going to catch next 2 weeks before the bye? Is he going to play or is he not? Like, is this a factor or is it not? And I put the over under 3, and Dennis took the under, and Dennis won the bet. So for all that we talk about these, even if JPP, right? You talk about him. I think these guys that were out of the game that come back into the game, there's just a different level of what you expect out of them, but the hype that comes with it. Oh, we signed whomever. Roquan Smith's there. He's a real guy. That's an acquisition. Picking up guys that weren't playing, we're doing podcasts 2 weeks ago. I never have high expectations for those guys. And that includes Odell Beckham Jr., anybody that wants to come back. You come back in the middle of the season, my expectations are low.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. And I mean, anyone who had high expectations for Deshaun Jackson, and let's be clear, I'm not sealing his fate here either. I mean, a hamstring issue, if he comes back out of the bye week, and he's fine and plays, and we'll see what happens. But you consider the investment. I mean, he was signed to the practice squad, right? I mean, it's not as though they gave him real money, anything like that. Jason Pierre-Paul, they gave him some incentives, things of that nature, but was not a very high base salary. So I mean, these are,
to me, it's not even about money. It's just about, like, are they going to get on the field? Are they going to make a play? Are they going to make an impact? And in the case of Deshaun Jackson, he might catch a 72-yard touchdown pass against the Browns 3 weeks from now, right? Like, that's definitely possible. But whether there's going to be a real contribution on a week-to-week basis, I'm not expecting that.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. I mean, and I think to a man, Eric DaCosta and John Harbaugh would probably say the same thing, and they'd say, hey, look, yeah, he's 35 and he's injury prone, and we know that. We signed him to the practice squad. He's not making any real money. If he can instill a lesson or two in some of our younger guys, because, despite what you said about not rooting for him, he's still a 3-time Pro Bowl wide receiver, still some cachet. I think 5,000 yard seasons in his career. I mean, this guy could really play.
I know, it was fun rooting against him. I love
it.
It.
But the point is, they would say, you know what, if it comes down to it, and we're in, for whatever reason, we wake up on the wrong side of the bed in Jacksonville at the end of the month, and we're in a tighter game than we anticipate. If he catches a 47-yard touchdown in that game, and then later in the game blows out a tire and he's done, well, he helped us win a football game, and that right there would justify the return. That'd be a justified return on the investment. So, hey, beggars can't be choosers when the Ravens proceed the way they do at wide receiver. It's a flawed approach. I'll continue to say that, but they also aren't built.
What is
like
flawed about it? They pick ones that don't work out. What you give me a flawed approach?
Well, the flaw was you traded Marquise Brown and you didn't replace him. Is it that hard to I mean,
I think they would think Bateman was the replacement, but okay.
Rashad Bateman was already on the team. Okay. This is like Orioles fans who said, well, we traded Jorge Lopez because Felix Bautista will be the closer. Well, he was already on the team. I mean, you don't, when you do this, you don't clone a guy. I remember people saying that about Dennis Pitta will be the new Anquan Bolden. No, Dennis Pitta was already Dennis Pitta. He can't be two guys. So, it's fine. I'm. It's okay to criticize
I'm just
one
saying
element
they're
of the
trying
team.
to address the wide. Look, believe me, I'm not going to defend Eric DeCosta ever on anything, on integrity or anything below that. Believe me, where I am, I'm just saying they can't do more than spend number one draft picks on wide receivers. And
but they traded one of them.
Because they didn't want to give him $18 million.
Okay, but you still have to replace the player. I don't want to get too.
I just don't think they want to throw the ball enough to have wide receivers be.
Well, then why draft 2 in 3 years? Then why waste 2 first-round picks in 3 years on them then? If that's truly the case,
I don't think they would have a $20 million wide receiver in their salary cap in this environment, and I think that was part of the Marquise Brown situation.
No, I understand that, but you just said that you don't think they really want to throw the ball to wide receivers that much. That's fine. Then why waste draft picks on them then? Then just draft something else then. I mean, I'm just saying that it's my opinion. There's a long history that supports my opinion. It's a flawed approach, but that one area that I don't like about how they handle themselves, there are plenty of other areas that they do outstanding work. It's a model organization, all of that. So again, I don't want to get too far off topic with that, because that's something we can talk about anytime. But
after they throw the ball 20 times in a game again and they win and we're happy that they win, we keep 3 years ago was, well, we need to throw more. We need to throw better. We need to have more wide receivers, all of that. And I don't know that's who they're ever going to be, that they need to have more than they have with Mark Andrews and a first round draft pick who's not on the field again, but they do commit draft capital to wide receivers. I guess that's my thought on it, is they have.
Well, I never said that. My position is they do just enough to get by at the position.
Fair enough.
There was we talked about this in August, Nestor. We said, what's going to happen if Rashad Bateman goes down? Well, Rashad Bateman went down. So again,
well, then they're going to need James Prochet to step up and Devin Duvernay to step up, and here we are, right? So
sure.
Those guys are what they are, despite what they look like in the preseason.
Well, and again, I don't want to take. I didn't really intend to get this far into this aspect of the discussion, on the heels of what was a really good win, and they ran the ball and all those things. I mean, the question will continue to be how this style of play translates to January. And we can't answer that right now, but we've seen how that's looked to this point with them venturing into January. And I don't even count Lamar's rookie year, but 2019 and 2020, and we've seen how it's wound up. So that's where that question will continue to be there. It's of my opinion is they still need more at that position, but
and you might be right on January 20th when they're eliminated.
Sure.
Because
I might be completely wrong. And I might be completely wrong too. And if I am, then I'll say, you know what, trade Rashad Bateman too and just have tight ends. All you need is street free agents and wide receiver then. And of course, I'm being a little facetious. And look, one thing I will say in Monday night's game, we keep. Where's Devin Duvernay? I mean, I have to ask that question. I mean, he had one target, one touch. I mean. And again, I don't want to complain too much about a game that they went out and they handled their business and they won pretty comfortably. And the defense was the star, but it's not as though the offense was just along for the ride. They ran the ball and they made plays when they needed to, and they were really efficient on third down. So again, I don't want to make this sound like I'm being over the top negative, because I don't feel that way about this game whatsoever. It's more my big picture concern. But I would like to know why they're not getting Devin Duvernay consistently involved in a game like that. And it might just be, hey, have him run the ball out of the backfield a couple times and things of that nature. So that was curious. There's no question about that. If you had told me before the game that the Ravens win by 2 touchdowns and Devin Duvernay touches the ball 1 time, then kind of scratching my head. I'm not going to lie about that, but we'll see how this plays out. And again,
I always say they don't want to throw the ball. I've been saying that for 5 years. They don't really want to throw the ball once they run well. Once they need to throw the ball because they're behind, then whether they can do it or not, they probably can't.
Well,
to your point, they probably can't.
Well, if that's the case, then I'm not optimistic about January, because they're going to have to throw the ball at times. I mean, that's inevitable, because you're going to go up, when you go into January, you've got these super specific game plans where teams are really scouting the heck out of you. And in many cases, they've seen you. Keep in mind, these NFC teams, the Saints, they saw Lamar Jackson. Okay, they saw him. I think they've seen him in the preseason, and they saw him for 5 plays when Joe Flacco was a starter in 2018. Tampa Bay saw Lamar as a rookie. I mean, these NFC teams, especially these teams, we talk about it all the time. And I'm glad we're on this, because I mentioned the high floor that Lamar Jackson brings, even when he's not sharp throwing the football. But these teams that don't see him on any kind of a regular basis, these NFC teams specifically, boy, they're at a disadvantage, because you can prepare and you can have whatever speedy wide receiver you have on your practice squad or running back or whoever.
Well, they have their own running back and quarterback in Taysom Hill, right?
Yeah, but Taysom Hill doesn't run anywhere close to what Lamar Jackson does from an athletic standpoint. So, it really is a case of these teams. I always think back to the 2000 Ravens, and wasn't it Brian Billick who said before the Super Bowl, they have no idea how fast we are? Right. I've said that about the Giants. By the way, did you see the trailer for the 30 for 30? Can't wait. Coming out in February for ESPN.
Well, I was at the event that night, so you saw all the highlights from Goose, and they're all wearing the same clothes. They were mic'd up all day, so it's going to be fascinating, especially now that we've lost Goose, like how it kind of all comes together and how that's portrayed.
No doubt. But to get back to the point I was making about Lamar, he's that same factor for teams that haven't played him or play him ever so rarely. You don't know how fast he is. You can see it on tape. We all see the highlights, but until you're out there and the bullets are flying, I know this even from talking to Ravens defensive players just practicing against them. It's just like, this guy's just at a different level. And I think for those teams that don't see him regularly, boy, it just makes it so much more difficult. Teams who have seen him multiple times, not to say they stop him, but they probably have a bigger tool bag of trying to figure out, of ways to slow things down a little bit, to contain him in this offense a little bit more. So, but hey, Ravens going into the bye week, they're 6-3. What a difference 3 weeks makes. Thinking about the aftermath of that Giants loss, and they'll get some guys back over bye week, and they'll continue to go to work and try to get better. We're seeing major progress on the defensive side, and the offense, despite some of the absences they've had, and despite me complaining about wide receiver, and I get it, I'm a broken record, that's fine, people can complain, but that aside, they got the job done Monday night, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. And there is lots to like about this offense, even if yes, the passing game remains a work in progress.
Probably not good to tackle Lamar by the head or the shoulders either. A couple guys tried that. I mean, sacks that should have been sacks where he evaporates. Luke and I will continue our conversation. It is bye week around here. We had a great day at Drug City on Friday on the Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with Goodwill, as well as our friends at Window Nation. A little bye week this week. We're back at Pappas next week on the 18th. We will have some big guests there, probably some pumpkin pie as well. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570 Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore positive.